The pregnancy test was still warm in my hands when my husband texted me that he was leaving me for a 20-year-old and had emptied our bank account. But what he didn't know was that I'm a forensic accountant who had been investigating him for 3 months. My name is Jessica, and 6 months later, I would watch Marcus get arrested at Miami International Airport on federal charges while I sat in a courtroom, visibly pregnant, ready to testify about the man who told me to get rid of his own child. But let me take you back to that Tuesday afternoon in Atlanta, sitting in my Honda outside the fertility clinic, staring at those 2 beautiful pink lines I'd been praying for since I was 30. I could already hear my mama's voice from back home in Ohio. She'd be crying happy tears, probably calling Grandma Rose immediately. "Jessie, honey," Grandma always said, "the Lord's timing is perfect, even when ours isn't." After 3 years of negative tests, failed treatments, and well-meaning family asking if we'd considered other options, I was finally pregnant, finally ready to give Marcus the family he claimed he wanted. Then my phone lit up with a message that shattered everything. "I'm leaving you and moving to Miami with my 20-year-old babe. I've already emptied our joint account, haha, don't contact me." I sat there, one hand on my still flat belly, the other holding proof that Marcus had just abandoned his own child before he even knew it existed. The cruel irony wasn't lost on me. The same day I discovered I was carrying his baby, he was running away to play house with someone barely older than my little sister Emma. My response was just 2 words: good luck. Now, my girlfriends later said I must have been in complete shock to stay so calm. But ladies, when you've spent 3 months secretly investigating your husband's suspicious credit card charges, when you've been tracking his lies like the financial crimes you solve for a living, calm isn't shock. Calm is knowing exactly what's coming next. You see, Marcus thought he'd outsmarted me. He thought that $35,000 he stole was everything we had. He thought his weekly business trips to Miami were fooling me. What he didn't know was that I had exactly 47 minutes before his flight took off to execute a plan that would destroy him. And it all started with one tiny detail that any woman watching this story could have spotted. Something so obvious you'll wonder how he thought he'd get away with it. Stick with me, because this story gets so much crazier than a cheating husband. 3 months earlier, something felt wrong with our finances, and as a forensic accountant, wrong numbers make my skin crawl. Marcus had started buying coffee twice a day, according to our credit card statements, once at 7 a.m. near his construction office, and again at 2 p.m. clear across town in Buckhead. Ladies, if your man suddenly needs caffeine in Atlanta's most expensive shopping district during work hours, he's not buying coffee for himself. The first red flag was subtle: $847 in business lunches during a month when Marcus claimed he was eating packed sandwiches to save money for our fertility treatments. The second flag was louder: cash withdrawals every Tuesday at 2:15 p.m. from an ATM outside a luxury apartment complex. The third flag was screaming: a $1,200 charge at Tiffany & Co. that he told me was a client appreciation gift. My professional instincts kicked in before my wifely denial could stop them. That night, while Marcus snored beside me, I opened my forensic accounting software and began treating my marriage like a case file. The pattern emerged within hours. For 8 months, Marcus had been systematically bleeding money from our joint account, small amounts that wouldn't trigger our bank alerts, but consistent enough to fund someone else's lifestyle. Restaurant charges in neighborhoods he claimed to never visit, hotel stays during late meetings, a monthly florist charge that certainly wasn't sending flowers home to me. My mama always taught me to trust my gut, and my gut was screaming that my husband was living a double life. The deeper I dug, the more sophisticated his deception became. Marcus had created a separate credit card linked to his business account, thinking I'd never see those statements. But here's what cheating husbands don't understand about forensic accountants. We're trained to find money that people don't want found. Those business expenses told a story: weekly dinner dates at the Capitol Grill, weekend trips to Savannah, jewelry purchases that never made it home. Someone was living very well on my husband's dime, and it wasn't me sitting through another round of fertility injections. That's when I hired Amber Rodriguez, a 22-year-old private investigator who specialized in infidelity cases. Most women wait too long to get proof, Amber told me during our first meeting at a coffee shop in Virginia Highland. By the time they hire me, the money's already gone and the husband's already moved out. Not this husband, not this money. Amber's job was simple: figure out who Marcus was spending our fertility fund on while I documented every financial crime he was committing, because that's what this was: theft. In Georgia, emptying joint accounts without spousal consent during ongoing fertility treatments counted as financial abandonment, and I was building a case that would hold up in court. The trap account was Grandpa Joe's idea, actually. During Sunday dinner at my parents' house, Dad mentioned how his father used to keep running away money during the Depression, a secret stash his wife never knew about in case times got desperate. Smart women always have backup plans, Jessie, Mama agreed, passing the mashed potatoes, especially when they're married to men who think they're smarter than they actually are. So I opened a new account at a different bank, slowly transferring our real savings while leaving just enough in our joint account to make Marcus think he was getting away with something. Let him steal what he thought was everything. Let him feel clever and superior. Meanwhile, Amber was gathering intelligence that would make his betrayal impossible to deny. Amber's first report arrived on a Thursday morning while Marcus was in the shower, singing off-key like he didn't have a care in the world. The photos were devastating in their clarity. Marcus holding hands with a petite brunette outside Phipps Plaza, kissing her at a restaurant in Midtown, helping her into his truck with the tenderness he used to show me. But the real gut punch was the final image: Marcus and this woman looking at engagement rings through a jewelry store window. Engagement rings while married to me. The woman wasn't 20, as Marcus would later claim in his cruel text. Emma Patterson was 26, a third-year law student at Emory University, and according to Amber's background check, the daughter of Gerald Patterson, Marcus's business partner at Patterson and Williams Construction. Everything suddenly made perfect, horrible sense. The late meetings were dinner dates with his partner's daughter. The Buckhead coffee runs were picking up Emma between her classes. The Tiffany charges were promise rings and necklaces for a woman young enough to still believe in fairy tale endings. But Amber had uncovered something far worse than infidelity. During her surveillance, she'd photographed Marcus using the company credit card for personal expenses, then watching him delete the email confirmations on his phone. The man wasn't just cheating, he was stealing from his own business to fund his affair. Construction companies handle massive cash flows, and Marcus had been skimming from client payments for months. Hotel rooms charged as site inspections, expensive dinners labeled as contractor meetings, even Emma's tuition payments disguised as consulting fees to a fake LLC he'd created. The deeper Amber dug, the more federal crimes she uncovered. Marcus wasn't just stealing from the company, he was manipulating tax documents to hide the theft. What started as martial infidelity had become wire fraud, tax evasion, and embezzlement charges that could land him in federal prison. Meanwhile, my body was betraying me in different ways. The fertility treatments were taking their toll, both financially and physically. Every injection cost us $300. Every negative test felt like another month of Marcus stealing from our future while building one with someone else. The irony was suffocating. Emma Patterson was naturally fertile, judging by the pregnancy scare Amber overheard during one of their phone calls. Here Marcus was, funding the lifestyle of a woman who could give him children effortlessly, while his wife endured painful procedures and crushing disappointment month after month. That realization broke something fundamental inside me. The woman who'd married Marcus, believing in love and partnership, was gone, replaced by someone calculating enough to set traps and document evidence. The trap account strategy was working perfectly. Marcus continued stealing small amounts from our joint account, 50 here, 200 there, completely unaware that our actual savings were safely hidden. He thought he was slowly bleeding me dry, while I was actually bleeding him of evidence. Each theft was photographed, documented, and added to a growing file that would destroy him in court. Every deleted email was recovered through my forensic software. Every lie was cataloged with timestamps and corroborating evidence. By month 2 of Amber's investigation, we had enough proof to end Marcus's construction career and send him to prison. But something darker was emerging from the surveillance reports. Emma wasn't just Gerald Patterson's daughter and Marcus's girlfriend. She was also a very smart law student who was asking suspicious questions about the company's finances and taking photos of documents when Marcus wasn't looking. Either Emma Patterson was gathering evidence for her own reasons, or she was even more naive than Marcus believed. The pregnancy test that would change everything was still weeks away, but the foundation for Marcus's destruction was already solid as concrete. He had no idea the forensic accountant he'd been sleeping next to was 3 steps ahead of every move he made. Emma Patterson wasn't what she seemed, and neither was her relationship with Marcus. Amber's deeper investigation revealed that Emma had been secretly recording conversations with Marcus, photographing company documents when he wasn't looking, and asking pointed questions about client payments that made no sense for a love-struck girlfriend. The law student was building her own case file, and it wasn't for romance. Gerald Patterson, Emma's father and Marcus's business partner, was facing a messy divorce from his wife of 28 years. The divorce proceedings had uncovered financial irregularities in their construction company that threatened to cost Gerald millions in asset division. Someone needed to prove that Marcus, not Gerald, was responsible for the missing money. Enter Emma. Beautiful, young, and perfectly positioned to seduce Marcus into confessing his crimes while gathering evidence that would exonerate her father. The realization hit like a sledgehammer. Marcus wasn't just cheating on me with his business partner's daughter, he was being manipulated by a woman smart enough to use his midlife crisis against him, while her father sat back and watched his partner dig his own legal grave. But Emma's plan had an unexpected complication. She was actually falling for Marcus's lies about leaving his wife and starting fresh. The photos Amber captured showed genuine affection alongside the calculated evidence gathering. Emma Patterson was playing a dangerous game where the line between manipulation and real feelings was getting blurred. Marcus, meanwhile, had no idea he was being investigated by 3 different women for 3 different reasons. His wife was documenting his financial crimes for divorce court. His girlfriend was recording his confessions for her father's legal defense, and a private investigator was photographing everything for a case that would eventually involve federal prosecutors. The fertility treatments were becoming more aggressive, more expensive, and more emotionally devastating with each failed cycle. Doctor appointments felt like stepping into an alternate universe where hope and science battled against a reproductive system that refused to cooperate. The irony was crushing. While fighting to create life with Marcus, evidence was mounting that would destroy the life we'd built together. Stress was affecting everything. Sleep became elusive. Appetite disappeared. Even Mama noticed during our weekly phone calls that something was wrong. But admitting that marriage was crumbling while desperately trying to get pregnant felt like admitting failure on multiple fronts. The breaking point came when Amber discovered Marcus was planning to propose to Emma during a weekend trip to Savannah while still married to me. The engagement ring purchase at Tiffany wasn't window shopping. It was a 2-carat diamond that cost more than our entire fertility treatment fund. Emma's response to the proposal would determine everything. Accept it, and she'd be complicit in bigamy. Reject it, and Marcus would realize his young girlfriend wasn't as naive as he believed. Either way, the weekend in Savannah would force everyone's hands. But federal investigators were already circling Patterson and Williams Construction based on complaints from subcontractors who hadn't been paid. What started as a marital investigation was becoming a federal case involving wire fraud, tax evasion, and potentially money laundering through fake LLCs. The timing couldn't have been worse or better, depending on perspective. Just as Marcus was planning his romantic proposal weekend, federal agents were preparing search warrants for the construction company's financial records. Emma Patterson was about to discover that her father's plan to frame Marcus had attracted the wrong kind of federal attention. The FBI doesn't distinguish between guilty parties when prosecuting financial crimes. Both Gerald and Marcus were about to face charges that would destroy their partnership, their company, and their freedom. Meanwhile, the fertility clinic called with news that would change everything. The latest round of treatments had actually worked, but the pregnancy was so early that another week of stress could cause a miscarriage. Marcus was planning to abandon his pregnant wife without knowing she was pregnant, while federal agents prepared to arrest him for crimes he committed to impress a woman who was secretly gathering evidence against him. The irony was almost poetic. Almost. The pregnancy test turned positive on the same Tuesday Marcus was supposed to be in Savannah proposing to Emma, but federal agents had other plans for his romantic weekend. At 6 a.m., FBI agents raided Patterson and Williams Construction with search warrants for financial records dating back 18 months. Marcus's phone exploded with panicked calls from Gerald Patterson, but he was too busy packing for his proposal trip to understand that his world was collapsing in real time. Emma had made her choice during their Savannah weekend. She rejected Marcus's proposal and confessed everything. The wire recordings of Marcus admitting to embezzlement, the photographs of falsified documents, even copies of the fake LLC paperwork were already in federal hands. Gerald Patterson's plan to frame his business partner had worked perfectly, except the FBI was now investigating both men for conspiracy. Marcus returned from Savannah devastated and desperate. Emma's rejection had shattered his fantasy of starting over, and the federal investigation meant his construction career was finished. The man who thought he was so clever, stealing from his wife and his business to fund a new life, discovered that everyone had been playing him from the beginning. That's when Marcus made the most cowardly decision of his pathetic life. He decided to abandon everything and run to Miami with what he thought was our life savings. The cruel text message arrived while holding proof that our 3 years of fertility struggles had finally succeeded. Timing was so brutally ironic that it felt like cosmic justice. Marcus was abandoning his unborn child on the exact day he unknowingly created the family he claimed to want. But Marcus had no idea that federal agents were monitoring his financial transactions as part of their investigation. The moment he emptied our joint account, he triggered alerts that would track his movements to Miami International Airport. The phone call came exactly 47 minutes before his scheduled departure to Miami. Marcus answered on the second ring, probably expecting Emma to beg him to come back. "Marcus, it's your wife, the one you're still legally married to." "Jessica, how did you get this number? I told you not to contact me." "Before you board that plane, there's something you need to know. I'm pregnant." The silence stretched for 30 seconds. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice was colder than winter in Ohio. "Get rid of it. I'm starting fresh in Miami. Don't try to find me." Those words, "get rid of it," referring to his own child, were recorded on the phone app Amber had taught me to use. Evidence that would later help federal prosecutors argue for maximum sentencing based on abandonment of a pregnant spouse. "Understood" was all the response he deserved. Marcus never made it to the departure gate. TSA agents, working with federal marshals, arrested him at security when his name triggered alerts for financial crimes under investigation. The man who thought he was so smart, running away to start over, was handcuffed in front of hundreds of travelers while his pregnant wife watched the arrest live on local news. The local Atlanta news crews had been tipped off about the arrest. A high-profile construction executive fleeing federal charges makes for compelling television. Watching Marcus get perp-walked through the airport while wearing the expensive suit he'd bought with stolen money felt like the universe finally balancing the scales. Emma Patterson was also arrested that afternoon, not for helping her father frame Marcus, but for conspiracy to commit wire fraud based on her recorded conversations. Turns out, the FBI doesn't appreciate law students who think they're smarter than federal investigators. Gerald Patterson's divorce became the least of his problems when federal agents arrested him at his lawyer's office. The plan to frame Marcus had backfired spectacularly. Both business partners were facing identical federal charges, and Emma was looking at conspiracy charges that would end her legal career before it started. The emergency room visit that evening confirmed what the pregnancy test had already revealed: 8 weeks pregnant and completely healthy despite months of stress and investigation. The baby Marcus told me to get rid of was thriving, protected by a mother who had learned to fight for what mattered most. Mama's voice on the phone that night was everything needed: steady, loving, and fierce with protective anger when told about Marcus's response to the pregnancy news. "That man never deserved you, honey, and he certainly doesn't deserve that baby." Grandma Rose was even more direct: "Good riddance to bad garbage. Now you can raise that child without his poison." The federal investigation that had started as a marital betrayal had ended with 3 arrests, multiple federal charges, and a pregnant woman who had outplayed every person who tried to manipulate her. Marcus's last phone call from jail was predictably pathetic, begging forgiveness, claiming he'd been confused, promising to be a good father. The man who told his pregnant wife to get rid of it suddenly wanted to play happy family from behind bars. The response was simple: "Good luck with that federal case, Marcus. My lawyer will be in touch about child support." 6 months pregnant and wearing my best Navy maternity suit, the federal courthouse felt like the stage for the most important performance of my life. The prosecution had built their case around the evidence Amber and I had gathered: financial records, recorded conversations, and digital forensics that painted Marcus as the architect of an 18-month embezzlement scheme. What they didn't expect was how powerful my testimony would be as both a forensic expert and the pregnant wife Marcus had abandoned. Judge Patricia Morrison, a 60-year-old mother of 4, listened intently as the prosecution outlined how Marcus had stolen $127,000 from client accounts to fund his affair with Emma Patterson. The courtroom was packed with reporters, construction industry professionals, and federal investigators who had followed the case from simple infidelity to federal conspiracy charges. Marcus sat at the defendant's table looking nothing like the confident man who had texted his cruel goodbye 6 months earlier. Federal detention had aged him years in months. His expensive suits were replaced by a standard defense attorney's borrowed jacket, and his cocky demeanor had crumbled into desperate anxiety. Emma Patterson's testimony was devastating in its clinical precision. The young law student, now facing her own federal charges, had agreed to cooperate fully with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. She detailed how her father had recruited her to seduce Marcus, gather evidence of his embezzlement, and record conversations that would clear Gerald of financial wrongdoing. But Emma's cooperation had backfired spectacularly. The recordings she made didn't just incriminate Marcus, they revealed that Gerald Patterson had been aware of the embezzlement for months and had participated in creating the fake LLCs used to launder the stolen money. Both business partners were facing identical charges, and Emma's attempt to save her father had destroyed 3 lives instead of 1. When called to testify, the weight of 6 months carrying Marcus's child while building the case against him felt both exhausting and empowering. The prosecution led me through my forensic analysis of the financial crimes, explaining to the jury how Marcus had systematically stolen from clients, manipulated tax documents, and created false business entities to hide his theft. The defense attorney tried to discredit my testimony by suggesting that my analysis was biased by personal animosity toward Marcus. That's when the prosecution played the recorded phone call where Marcus told his pregnant wife to get rid of their unborn child. The courtroom went completely silent. Several jurors looked visibly disgusted. Judge Morrison's expression shifted from professional neutrality to barely controlled anger. Even Marcus's defense attorney looked like he wanted to disappear. "Mrs. Williams," the prosecutor continued, "can you explain to the jury what happened after your husband made that statement about your pregnancy?" He was arrested 47 minutes later at Miami International Airport, attempting to flee the country with money he had stolen from his business partners and clients. The pregnancy he told me to terminate is now 6 months along and completely healthy. The defense had no meaningful cross-examination. How do you defend a man who stole money to fund an affair, then abandoned his pregnant wife when caught? Marcus's attorney spent most of his closing argument asking for leniency based on his client's momentary lapse in judgment, a phrase that earned audible scoffs from the gallery. Gerald Patterson's separate trial was equally devastating. The man who had orchestrated his daughter's seduction of Marcus to gather evidence had actually made himself a co-conspirator in the crimes he was trying to expose. Federal prosecutors argued that Gerald's knowledge of the embezzlement, combined with his participation in creating shell companies, made him equally guilty of wire fraud and money laundering. Emma Patterson's sentencing hearing was perhaps the most tragic. The brilliant law student who had thought she could manipulate federal evidence in her father's favor was facing disbarment before even taking the bar exam. Her cooperation with prosecutors would reduce her prison sentence, but her legal career was finished before it started. Marcus's sentencing day arrived on a cold February morning when his daughter was 7 months along and visibly active. The prosecution argued for the maximum sentence based on the amount stolen, the complexity of the scheme, and the abandonment of his pregnant wife. Character witnesses for Marcus were notably absent. Apparently, stealing from your business partners and abandoning your pregnant wife doesn't inspire loyalty. Judge Morrison's sentencing was swift and decisive. 3 years in federal prison, full restitution of the stolen money, and immediate child support obligations that would continue until his daughter turned 18. The man who had told his pregnant wife to get rid of it was ordered to support that child for the next 18 years, with payments deducted directly from his prison work wages. But the most satisfying moment came when Judge Morrison addressed Marcus directly. "Mr. Williams, your crimes were bad enough, but your treatment of your pregnant wife reveals a character so lacking in basic human decency that this court can only hope your time in federal prison teaches you the value of accountability." Marcus was led away in handcuffs while his pregnant ex-wife watched from the gallery, surrounded by family members who had driven down from Ohio to witness justice being served. The baby kicked enthusiastically during the sentencing, as if celebrating her father's accountability from the safety of her mother's womb. Baby Rose Williams arrived on a sunny April morning, screaming her displeasure at the world with the same fierce determination her mother had shown during the federal investigation. Named after Grandma Rose, who had driven down from Ohio to help with the delivery, little Rose entered the world surrounded by love, financial security, and a mother who had learned that professional skills could become the most powerful tools for personal protection. The man who had told his pregnant wife to get rid of it was serving his second month in federal prison when his daughter took her first breath. The partnership offer from Kessler and Associates, Atlanta's most prestigious forensic accounting firm, had arrived 3 weeks after Marcus's sentencing. The media attention from the federal case had transformed a betrayed wife into a sought-after expert in financial fraud investigation. Speaking requests poured in from women's organizations, legal conferences, and law enforcement agencies wanting to learn Jessica's techniques for uncovering financial deception. Marcus's attempts at reconciliation from prison were pathetically predictable. Letters arrived weekly, filled with apologies, promises of changed behavior, and desperate pleas for visitation rights with the daughter he had rejected before birth. Each letter went directly into a file that his attorney would never see, evidence of continued manipulation attempts that would be useful during future custody hearings. Emma Patterson was serving 18 months in minimum security federal prison, her legal career permanently destroyed by her attempt to manipulate federal evidence. Gerald Patterson received a longer sentence than his daughter, but shorter than Marcus, his cooperation with prosecutors earning him slight leniency for a scheme that had backfired spectacularly on everyone involved. The construction company, Patterson and Williams, was liquidated to pay restitution to defrauded clients. The building where Marcus had conducted his affairs and planned his escape was now a yoga studio owned by 2 women who had no idea their peaceful meditation space was once the headquarters of a federal conspiracy. Baby Rose's nursery was decorated in soft yellows and greens, colors chosen during pregnancy when the baby's gender was unknown, but her strength was already evident. The room overlooked a garden where tulips bloomed in defiance of Georgia's unpredictable spring weather, a perfect metaphor for new life flourishing despite difficult circumstances. Mama's visits from Ohio became monthly traditions, with Grandma Rose making the trip whenever her arthritis allowed. 3 generations of strong women gathered around the baby, who represented hope, independence, and the kind of fresh start that couldn't be stolen or manipulated by weak men making desperate choices. The book proposal came from a major publisher who had followed the case through national media coverage. Financial Infidelity, a forensic accountant's guide to protecting yourself, would combine practical advice with personal narrative, teaching women how to spot the warning signs that had almost destroyed one marriage, but ultimately saved one woman's future. Speaking engagements took on deeper meaning when audience members shared their own stories of financial betrayal. Women across the country were discovering that their professional skills, whether in banking, law, medicine, or business, could become powerful weapons against men who underestimated their intelligence and resilience. The child support payments arrived monthly, like clockwork, deducted automatically from Marcus's prison wages and deposited into Rose's college fund. The man who had tried to steal his daughter's future was now legally obligated to fund her education for the next 18 years, whether he wanted to or not. But the most profound transformation was personal. The woman who had once doubted her instincts, who had rationalized away obvious warning signs because she desperately wanted her marriage to succeed, had become someone who trusted herself completely. Professional expertise wasn't just about solving other people's problems, it was about protecting your own life from people who would destroy it. The final lesson crystallized during Rose's first laugh, a delighted giggle that filled the nursery with pure joy. Some betrayals reveal themselves slowly through suspicious charges and deleted emails. Others announce themselves through cruel text messages and abandoned promises. But the most important discovery was simpler. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. Marcus had shown his true character the moment he told his pregnant wife to get rid of their child. Everything that followed, the arrest, the trial, the federal conviction, was simply the natural consequence of a man who had revealed himself to be exactly as selfish and cruel as his actions suggested. Rose would grow up knowing that her mother had fought for justice, not revenge. That professional skills could become personal power. That trusting your instincts, especially when numbers don't add up, could save your life and your future. The story that began with a pregnancy test and a devastating text message had ended with a healthy baby, a successful career, and the kind of hard-earned wisdom that only comes from surviving betrayal and choosing to thrive anyway. Numbers don't lie, but people do. Trust yourself when something feels wrong, and remember, you're stronger and smarter than anyone who tries to manipulate you realizes.